Welcome to the Jarrod Thomas Show right here on YouTube and anywhere podcasts are found. That's become a running joke around here is that I tell people all the time. I bomb in on the shows and I tell them anywhere podcasts are found, and they just look at me and roll their eyes.
Yeah, and you bomb in periodically.
I do.
And do that to promote yourself. I mean, your show.
Well, this is a bit of a petri dish. I've tried to explain this, but apparently people only hear what they want to hear, Pastor Paul.
Well, true that.
We're trying
That's
to
the story of my life as well.
We're trying to start a podcasting network out here, and trying to figure out the right ways to promote it. Trying to figure out the right ways to make sure people have the best experience they can have while they're here. And so the only thing I knew to do was to just
keep talking.
Well, just get involved and see what works, what doesn't work, what's awful, what's good. I mean, the content's the content, but just the other logistical parts of it.
And I've heard that someone actually has to hear a thing at least, well, you know this in advertising, 7 times before it even registers.
Yeah.
And so your frequent flyer into everybody else's show, bombing in, is probably appropriate.
And I often get drug into other topics.
Okay.
Kicking and screaming. And screaming.
Yeah, but you still lend your voice periodically, which is beneficial in this community because you're like a hero.
Well, no, I wouldn't.
See what I did there?
I wouldn't. That's not true. Is what just happened right there. This is Pastor Paul Knight, still the lead pastor at Hope Church.
Whoa,
here in town.
Still,
well, I'm just saying. At some point, you got to look around and think you gotta enough of this. I got to move on to other challenges. I got to do other things.
Maybe we should start a podcast network.
You want to start a podcast and put the Bible down on Sundays?
Oh man, I'm actually contemplating that.
There's always one thing I've found in people that I've known that have retired. They keep them in it. Like, and I'm not saying this is true for you. You'll tell me if it is. The administrative stuff,
yeah, none.
The dealing with all the people stuff,
some.
Yeah, more or less though. The working Saturdays, doing weddings, the funerals. But man, when the lights turn on Sunday, let's go. And that's what keeps guys like you kind of in it. You do the other stuff so that you can do what you really love.
I love doing weddings. I love doing funerals. Maybe funerals more because there's a captive audience. Right?
Well, that's true.
And and no joking aside, you look at that box when it's a father or a mother or a brother or sister or a family member or an aunt and uncle, you look at that box, you realize that's me someday. And so people are very tender in that moment, and because of my love for Jesus and my love for people, I want to try to connect the two there. So I actually enjoy doing funerals in a certain way. I mean, not completely enjoy them, but I think that it's an honor to be able to do that because I don't always talk about the person that's in the box as much as I talk about Jesus. And so I think that's amazing, actually. So, but there is a piece of that when you're talking about when the lights go on. Like it's hard sometimes to listen to a sermon as a consumer, or not consumer is the wrong word, as a participant from the pew or the chair, because I'm like, oh, I would have said that with a little bit more of this or a little bit more of that. And so you have to relearn how to be a parishioner.
Yeah, I think a lot of times in a funeral setting too, people are all over the place with their emotions.
Oh, yeah.
The message that oftentimes depending on how the person passed, is going to determine how they're going to feel at that service.
Yes.
That's a little bit of a sticky wicket for a guy like you.
It is. It's different for everybody. Some of them are very clear. I think I can do this appropriately, but I don't want to hurt the family again. But I did a funeral for a couple who was from our town community, where a tree fell on a home that they were staying at, and both of them died.
It's awful,
right? It was an Airbnb, and that was like a shocking, painful, sudden, weird. And that service, again, trying to communicate the comfort of Jesus and the comfort of the Father to people was a privilege to do, but it was hard because it was. And then anytime for one of your former broadcasters here, I did a funeral for his son, who was 5 years old.
Sure.
And those are very, very painful. But again, because of my belief in God's love for us, you can communicate that in a service even when it's shocking and painful and hurtful. And in hopes that someday there's a piece of that picks up. And the person that probably doesn't even think about it that day, but maybe a year from now, all of a sudden something that was said at the service or when they listen back to it, it grabs their heart in a good way. Yeah. So that's kind of what I hope for.
With that in mind, and and I'm not going to ask you for a retirement date because you likely don't have one.
I do not have one.
But it's needless to say, I think it's fair to say you have more runway behind you than you do ahead of you. You're likely,
I assume,
thinking about it and certainly talking with the beautiful Bonnie about it and trying to figure out what next steps are going to be for you and your family. With that in mind, technology has touched every area of our life. AI is certainly, I don't want to say a big buzzword all of a sudden because then you sound like you're 214 years old. But I'm curious how AI has touched your business, if you will, the business of the church.
Yeah, I was at a seminar in Newport Beach, California, about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and one of the speakers was just on AI and sermons and AI and church work, and he's becoming a specialist mostly because he's a pastor, but he's also a tech nerd, and he recorded or picked up off the internet one of the guy's sermons from the room, slipped it into AI, and then he showed it to us, but it was in German.
Oh wow!
And the guy looked, he goes, "Wait, that's me." And he was speaking fluent German, beautiful, and his lips were moving appropriately to the words that he was speaking. He said, "I don't know German." And the guy said, "This was AI." And the possibility of technology helping like in the communication of the message, I think is amazing. There's massive dangers. I'm hearing of pastors who are just downloading sermons. I use AI sometimes to craft a sentence or to get an idea on something to make it more palatable or more pertinent or more catchy, right? And I think everybody should do that. The big issue now in message preparation is plagiarism.
Sure.
Right? Are we just downloading someone's sermon? But you can go to AI and put in a passage of scripture now and say, give me an outline for this, and it'll give you a whole sermon. And that's helpful and dangerous, and it more than ever with clergy and teachers and students who are using AI, the integrity is going to matter more and more. Yeah. Because if you're using AI to prepare your stuff as a study tool, that's one thing. If you're using it to use AI to prepare your sermon, I think like that's what you're going to speak. I think that's dishonest because AI is never going to communicate love.
Sure.
Right? It's learning and it's going to feel like maybe love, but God's word has to go through the person and out their mouth, not just out their mouth.
It's interesting because we live in a time when at some level we don't crave, at least the opinion would be, or I think the perception might be, perception is probably the better word for it, that human interaction isn't necessary. You know, if you want to send a message to somebody, or if you want to send a message to a lot of somebody's, you pick up your smartphone, you start a group text, and you're talking to 10, 15, 20 or more people in a click of a few buttons. And so churches, which could dovetail into a conversation about church attendance, which we'll get to here in a little bit, is that if I don't have to go to your place of worship, and if I don't have to sit down, and if I don't have to get up and I have to shower and get ready and do all the things to be appropriate for the world to see or how I want the world to see me, I don't need that. I'll just get it a different way. And it's really affecting how we do just about everything. What scientists tell us and what behavioralists tell us is that we need human interaction. We need face-to-face.
I think we're seeing the danger of the lack of it right now.
Well, sure we are. But what the question is that the toothpaste is out of that tube, right? So what do you do about it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we wrestled with this during COVID as a church. We were already broadcasting our services and stuff like that. But then all of a sudden, everybody was on services. So we're like incredibly thankful that we were already doing that. And now after COVID, we have people that still have never come back to the church who are a part of us, right? They say that Hope Church is still their church. We're with you every Sunday, but we don't see them. And so part of me is like grateful that we have the opportunity. Part of me wishes, and again, I want people to still watch online or to listen at 9 o'clock on KNOX, right, to our services. But to me, that's the we don't have another option experience, as opposed to that's my preferred experience. I would love for everybody who is able to be present, sitting next to somebody who's hurting, sitting next to somebody who's worshiping, sitting next to somebody, because the human we're not just gathering information, we're gathering an experience with people. Here's the way I like to say it. We worship all week long in everything we do if we're a Christ follower. All our words and deeds are meant to be worship, but once a week we bring all of our worship together to worship together.
When's the last time you took the stage, so to speak, and you looked out and saw a full house?
Last Sunday.
Every chair was full.
Oh, no. We purposely don't allow that. Right? We always bring in more chairs, so there's always room for the guest. Right? Sorry.
Okay, so...
Right. So we're down a little bit in attendance the last couple of weeks because of summer, but by full, I would say 70% or 65% feels good in the room, right? So going into prior to the last couple of weeks, attendance was really good for our 3 services. Our evening service is the least attended, so that's about 200 people.
There is a guy, and I think you may have touched on this a little bit during Noah's show, and he works at Oklahoma State University, and he teaches there. And he is a guy that pays attention to things like AI, robots, and his warning to the world likely won't affect you and I, because what he's saying is by the year 2300, that robots, machines, computers, and AI will be so omnipresent that there will be about 100 million people on the planet. That's it. In a time when there's, 8 billion people on the planet, down to 100 million, in part because, and he says people are getting it wrong, it's not going to be a Terminator type extinction.
Right.
Which
AI is not going to go around and kill people.
Right. What it's more like going to be is that AI is just very slowly, and in some cases not so slowly, just take over our jobs. So we'll always need doctors. They're finding AI has a place in medicine. Mm-hmm. We're seeing it with some robots that do some work and maybe some dictation for doctors and stuff like that. But you're still going to need somebody to tell you, let me see that bruise, Pastor. I want to make sure that it's healing correctly. That type of thing is still going to be happening.
That may be like a PA, a physician assistant. The real physician is the AI robot, and he just helps handle the one-on-one.
But what it illustrates, if true, it appears is trending in that direction. If you look the guy up, his name is Subhash K-A-K, which I believe is CAC. You will see that he's spent quite a bit of time talking about this and researching it and writing papers on it.
Do we know it was him or was it AI?
I see what you did there. I see what you did there. But his warning is technology has taken over us, and we're just getting started. The worst that AI will ever be is today. It's only getting better.
Yeah.
So very slowly in our lifetimes yet, I believe, we will see this more and more take over the way that we do just about everything. In the radio business in particular, this started in the early 90s with the advent of voice tracking. And we started to watch a lot of teammates walk out the door because, well, the computer will just record JT's voice and it will air overnights. And then I can also work my midday shift. Well, likely if you're listening overnight, you're not listening during the midday, so you won't know the difference. No one knows. Or we'll just not put a voice there at all. We'll just play music. But somebody lost their job for that.
Yeah.
And then over the years, we've seen more and more as computers continue. Now we can voice track from afar. Now we can bus shows in from other places. And so it's really taken our business and changed it completely to the point where you don't have to walk around the building for long, Pastor Paul, to see that on this side, as I call it, this side, the production side of the business, there's not a lot of bodies left anymore.
There are a lot of empty rooms.
There is.
With microphones.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of empty cubicles where people were to work, in part because AI and computers took it over.
So one of the things that's taken place in the realm that I work in is anybody who's interested can listen to 15 sermons a week. Mm-hmm. Right? It's not all AI. It's just video production, things like that. And they're listening, in some cases, to the best communicators in the nation. And then you have an average communicator in your church on a Sunday morning, and it's like, And that's where I think we miss the plot of what we're doing. It's not just about the message. It's not just about the proclamation of God's word, although that's, at least especially in my life, that's a huge component of it. But it's the worshiping together, and it's the human touch, right? And so eventually when you talk about this idea of humanity being erased gradually by machine, that should cause a little shudder in all of us. Now, the faith side of me says, God's got that. He knows what's going on. He promises that everything will never all be destroyed, right? So there will always be a humanity. He speaks about it in end times when like a third of humanity is wiped away. That's through war. I don't know if AI is going to run war or not, but so there are some terrible things coming, but God preserves his people, right? So I am not worried about the entire earth being destroyed by a machine, but we're seeing this even with some of the young people right now. They're not dating.
No.
They're not getting married.
No.
They're hanging out with their machine.
Well, sure.
And they're getting everything they think they need from that. And in some cases, it's easier to be in relationship with a machine than have to deal with a real person.
You know what else they're doing, or that I see a lot of? And I have a 22-year-old daughter, so this is something that I see all over the place in relevance to the machine, is they get a lot of Maggie's classmates started dating somebody at, say, 9th grade, 14, 15 years old. They're getting closer to their mid-20s, and they're still dating that same person.
Yeah.
So it's like they decided as 14-year-olds, or maybe they didn't decide, but had a really good feeling, or maybe this is comfortable, or maybe I don't want it to change, or whatever they think, but they're not going out and dating several people before they're decided this is what I like, or this is what I want, or this is more for me. And at some level, that brings you a little comfort, maybe?
Maybe.
But at some level, you're like, wait a minute, aren't we setting ourselves up here for a little bit of a disaster somewhere along the line?
Well, the other thing that's happening is we're going to start encountering people that have been dating someone for 2 years that they've never met physically.
Sure.
Right. And that is also like incredibly dangerous and weird. Right. My son worked for a company in Canada for a period of time. He doesn't now. He went 6 months without ever meeting anybody from the company.
Yeah.
And I said, how do you know you even work for them? He goes, well, they send me a paycheck.
Right.
And so I thought, how incredible. Everything was done online. And then his work was done with a handful of people in the region that he was living in. But all of the interactions with his company were online. And then they flew him one time to Toronto after several months of working there. And I thought,
proof of life.
Yeah, this is like amazingly weird. And so, again, I think there's going to be a backlash that is going to be profound for people when they realize that we actually need each other and the physical touch. There's been studies proven that people need like someone to touch them physically on the hand or in a shoulder or something for them to be healthy.
We need a hug. The hug, though, needs to be 6 minutes to release the proper amount of endorphins.
Yeah, you get that at home, Jared.
Well, yeah.
This is not an invitation. We're talking about
Let's just
the possibility.
say I got my hug before I came to work today.
Goodness.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So I'm good. But
Bonnie's still sleeping in the other room but I left.
But there is a lot of truth to that. We don't seek. I don't know if we don't seek it or we don't want it or we don't think we need it or whatever. But we don't. The physical touch or the grabbing of holding somebody's hand or those sort of simple gestures that maybe we took for granted no longer really exist. I mean, we're married to our machines.
Yes, and I used to work in a nursing home as a CNA back through college, and I remember just the impact on people. You could see it in their eyes when you walked into their room and you held their hand as you talked to them.
Yeah.
And we are losing that in our culture, but we're not losing the need. So that need goes internal, and it puts a hole in the heart because we are a community-style people. God made us for a relationship with himself and relationship with others. The greatest commandment in the Bible, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, directed towards God, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
To love towards others. People are not healthy if they don't have those two components of relationship in their life.
So if we get to 2300, as the good professor says here, and there's 100 million people on the planet, but 100 million of them are Christians. How are we feeling? Is God still keeping his promise to the world? Or is humanity fallen off the face of the earth?
Well, if they're all Christ followers or just under the term religious.
Well, let's
Christians.
just say they meet the burden of being a Christ follower.
An actual Christ follower. First of all, I don't think that'll ever happen until the end, when Jesus comes back and his people reign forever.
Mm-hmm.
Then everybody will be a Christ follower. In the meantime, I don't think that's ever going to happen because there's always going to be people who have to make a choice, right? But one of the I'm thinking this in real time.
Right.
You talk about 23 million people.
No, 100 million.
100 million people
in 2300.
Okay, I think we go back to the first command that God ever gave. If in fact people are followers of Christ at that moment, we go back to God's first command, which is a brilliant and amazing and beautiful command: be fruitful and multiply. I think you have to. Humanity is made to multiply.
So, I guess we're not having kids.
We would have to, if we're going to be obedient to Christ at that moment, you'd have to.
No. But we're not having kids. We've got AI looming in our life. We're married to our machines. It gets pretty easy in a podcast to paint a picture of doom and gloom.
Yeah.
The church attendance is an issue.
Yes.
So if you are in our business, we always say, you got to meet them where they are. You gotta be in the places that the people go. So you need to be on social media. You got to be
100%.
When you turn on your smart TV, there's the Jarrod Thomas Show podcast, a placard of it to remind you to go check it out. So in your business, do you also need to be where the people are?
Yeah, I think 100%. And actually, again, the model was Jesus, right? Jesus went to parties. Jesus went and hung out where people were not like, I don't think the only place the church should hang out is in the church building. Like when we close our services, I say, let God love you, love him in return, love others in Jesus' name, go be church. The church isn't a place, the church is a people. And so I think the church needs to get out and infiltrate every crevice of the community, right? So if people are online, I think the church should get online. If the people are listening to AI, somehow the church should communicate and use AI to benefit or to somehow keep the message out there. That's why we're on radio, although apparently radio is declining.
No, the latest data tells you that radio is really holding strong. In fact,
that's good to hear.
The other thing about radio that people, I don't know if they hear it or choose not to hear it, but the other thing about radio is it's still far and away has the most reach of any medium that is out there. In fact, a little more than 8 out of 10 Americans listen to the radio at least 15 minutes a day.
See, that's amazing to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's I personally think radio is better for our method than TV.
Yeah, well, radio has had to change too.
Because but look at this. We're way better on radio than we are on TV.
Yeah, I mean, I'm aging better than you are, but the point is...
there's still a point. The bar's not high.
I'm stepping over it, in fact. Yeah, I'm stepping over it.
Yeah,
no, I mean, nobody's going to say, wow, look at those playmates.
But true that. But I think that the medium of radio and the medium of internet, those kinds of things, I think they should definitely be something the church leans into. There was a day when all of the scriptures were held on a scroll, and the Bibles were chained to the pulpit in churches because they didn't believe people could handle that, right? What was in the message. And I'm thinking, and then someone came along and invented a printing press, and some churches said, absolutely not. And some churches said, well, of course, let's get it into their hands, right? With the same kind of enthusiasm of getting it into their hands. I think the first book printed was the Bible. By Gutenberg, right? And so with that same enthusiasm, I think we should embrace every technology that allows us to communicate the Word of God in a way that is compelling and inviting and true. Right? But I think we also have to have the massive caution, because when you invent a printing press, eventually you're going to print things that aren't true, and they're going to pervert things and destroy a good thing, or take a really, really good thing and make it not so good. And that same thing will happen with AI. The same thing will happen with everything. But that doesn't mean we avoid it.
So I prepare a lot harder for these podcasts than I ever did for a radio show. Which also
the fact that you have a notebook tells me that.
Talk about stepping over a bar. I mean, that's so that's the same kind of premise here. But church attendance from 21 to 23, so 2021 to 2023, 3 in 10 people attended church during that time frame. 9% of that 3 did every week, 11% once a month, 56% did in what was referred to as a very seldomly, and 31% never attended. Okay, so now in 2025, this according to Gallup, again, 20% every week, 41% attends monthly, 57% never attended church, 39% of millennials never attended church at all. Yeah. Didn't even bother to get off the couch to try it out. And by the way, these statistics that I'm referencing will be available to you in the show notes for those of you that care.
Do you have Gen Z on there?
Gen Z, I'm glad you asked, sir. Gen Z is defined for the purpose of our conversation between the ages of 18 and 30. 77.7% of Gen Zers don't attend church. And they don't attend church because they are looking for a church that helps the poor. Mm-hmm. So what's interesting about Gen Zers in this little study that I was reading prior to our show today was it's like everything else with Gen Z. It's not that they don't want to go to church, but they're only going to, my interpretation, not necessarily yours, but they're only going to grace you with their presence if you play by their rules. 72% doubt the existence of God. Again, Gen Zers, 18 to 30-year-olds. 73.6% are looking for churches to address mental health. 69.2% are looking for churches to provide opportunities to help others.
I think this is fascinating.
So when you think about what's happening in the church, and again, it's only natural to take a look at the boomers. By the way, there's some statistics that are a little bit interesting about boomers too.
They're kind of a bust.
Now, boomers are the higher end, the older gen, classified as those that I believe at this point would be 60 or older, 65 or older, maybe. So generally most people's just the older generation, right? Fought in the war, did the thing, right? Right, whatever.
I'm a boomer,
but boomers. So what's interesting, again, Gallup in the show notes, boomers stick with their church more than any other generation at 65%. So those that go say, I love my church. I love my flavor of church. I'm 65%, almost 7 out of 10 say, I'm good. I like it. I was born Catholic. I was baptized Catholic. I'm staying Catholic. You're not going to move me to any sort of different denomination, right? Boomers, though, have also experienced, generationally speaking, the greatest loss going to church at 22%. So 2 out of 10 have said, I'm done. I'm done.
Checking out.
I'm done with it.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because you would think that as you get closer to the end of life.
Well, almost like getting ready for a final exam.
You would think that your attention to the detail of God would be a little bit more present in your life.
And okay, there's like 5 things I want to say, and I forgot 4 of them.
Speaking of taking a note here.
Yeah, but I think part of that is because churches have missed the plot. Like, so when someone drops off and they say, you would think that they'd be paying more attention to God, and maybe they actually are, and they haven't found him in their churches. Right? Maybe the churches have gotten off the script of what God, maybe we're actually just doing things to do things rather than doing them out of relationship for God, right? And that, when you look at the Gen Z, that's one of the things that's percolating right now worldwide is there's actually an increase happening amongst college students because of the care for people, because of the passion for poor, because that's what Jesus was like, right? And so the churches that are living out a Christ-like effort into the community, that is increasing the attendance or the engagement. And again, if I try to say this periodically, if you don't find Jesus in our church, go to a different church. Keep looking until you actually find Jesus.
Sure.
Right? Because it's not about attending a church. And so if the church is off plot, and this is hard for me to say because I want every church like in our community to flourish, but I want every church in our community to actually be in love with Jesus and to teach Jesus. And so it doesn't, like, people have to make a choice. And I think church attendance makes way more sense after you figure out whether you're going to be a follower of Jesus. Now, I think in some churches you can find Jesus in a church if you're a seeker, or if you're not sure who Jesus is. I would say, go to a church to see if you can figure out who Jesus is. But if that church doesn't help you find Jesus, go somewhere else. But what we do is we put church attendance as the thing you're supposed to do. That's a piece of what we're supposed to do. And so it goes back to the other thing. That's why the church needs to get out of the building and start doing church outside so that people who aren't hanging out in churches can still discover who Jesus is.
Well, and if pre-pandemic numbers, and again, all these studies will be there for you in the show notes, I promise.
I should have read the show notes.
Well, you didn't have them yet because the show hasn't been produced yet. But pre-pandemic.
Do you use AI to produce the show notes?
I am...
I'm interrupting your thought. I apologize.
No. I have it written down. I have a notebook even. I'm ready. So I'll come back to that in a second. But AI, for me, is difficult, in part because I think a lot of what we do in this space is supposed to be creative in mind. Mm-hmm. The second that we decided with our cell phones that we would allow somebody to monitor our buying, we would allow somebody to monitor our location, we would allow anytime the terms and conditions that we all just signed, so give me the damn phone so I can leave the store type thing. Anytime that we did that, what we really did, though, is we signed away so that we could develop algorithms so that we could have AI. So what I really struggle with in this environment in particular is I want this to be authentic and I want it to be mine. So I don't, or in this case, ours. So I don't want AI to have really poisoned maybe my thought process or my creative ability to do anything. Now, those of you that might see this might think, well, that's 1974 way of thinking. It is. And I own it. And I don't use things for thought starters. If you ever get an email from me or any sort of piece of writing comes directly from my fingertips, all the misspellings, all the poor punctuation, all
you
of it,
should see my text messages. It's mine.
Well, that's what I mean, though. I mean, so I don't know that eventually we're going to get to a point where there's, that's kind of cute and nostalgic, right? The fact that he can't spell presents is just going to be, that's nice.
But AI can produce a script of what happened. Post-production.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm referring
back to everybody's addiction to their cell phones and scrolling through, right? There's an app out there that shows up in my reels because everybody watches their reels, right? And I think it's called Peach, and I don't want to endorse anything that again runs kind of counter to what we're talking about. But they will take, like, Peach will sit according to the app. I haven't tried it out, but just the technology, it makes me shake my head a little bit. I don't have time to sit through that meeting. So you launch Peach, and Peach collects all the information, bottles it up, kicks it out to you, and you get a 1 or 2 page document that said, this is what you missed in the meeting. Here are all the notes.
They'll even summarize it for you so you don't have to read the whole document.
Right. Now, again, back to church and all the other things, that stuff's out there. So let's say Pastor Paul at the end of his sermon decided, you know what? I'm just going to AI this whole thing. We're going to package everything that we did here in an hour and 10 minutes. We're going to make it a 12-minute reel. And AI is just going to kick it out, and it's available on the website. I wonder how many views you'd get.
I think depending on how effective the piece is.
Well, you would make sure it's effective.
Yeah,
you'd
so I think you'd get a lot of views.
Well, of course you would.
Yeah.
And what people would tell you is, I don't have to come to church for an hour, Pastor, because you put it all together for me, so I just watch the thing at the end and we're good.
If lives were transformed by just information, that'd be amazing.
Sure.
Lives are not transformed just by information.
Sure. But you have a whole generation of Gen Zers that are coming up that would tell you that's not true. I don't need you. I don't need you. Well, right.
That's what I'm going to say.
But right now, what they're saying and the messages that they're sending is, and it's a large group of people.
It's huge.
For all of us that only had one kid. Apparently, a lot of us had one kid because there's a lot of Gen Zers that are in the world. And to be the biggest generation since the baby boomer generation is here.
Yeah.
And what they're saying is, hey, listen, just put it on my device. Make it available to me. I'll go get it when I want it. I don't have time Sunday at 9. I want it right here.
So I'm going to say yes. Yes, but I'm going to say, again, I think the church should lean into every opportunity to communicate the love and message of Jesus. But AI and media are not going to communicate love. They'll communicate the information of love. They can communicate the need for love, but they actually can't give you love. And that's where we're going to need people. And what's going to happen, I think, is eventually people are going to AI or media or information overload, and they're going to realize I'm still empty. And hopefully, prayerfully, that's where people can step in and say, you know what? You've been listening to that for 6 weeks or 6 months or 6 years. Maybe we ought to go, honey, and try the real place. That's what I'm hoping.
Well, in fact, you're making a big investment in that hope, and we'll get to that in just a second here too. But the thing that I get concerned with is that one day, whoever the next Pastor Paul is at Hope Church, because I don't think it'll happen in your tenure, is going to be standing essentially in front of a camera, doing the thing on a Monday, get it all AI'd and packaged up and edited and all the things. It'll get out to the world whenever he or she decides to release it, and that's how people will consume church. Now, the
church or the message?
Well, I mean, I think
so. The largest church in America right now is it's like 40,000 people.
Sure. The
pastor preaches once, and it's recorded and broadcast simultaneously and or delayed to like 40 campuses.
Okay. So then,
but there's a live pastor there, a host pastor that still works with the people during the week, and there's a congregation there. They're watching the message.
Sure. Okay. So then he or she stands in front of this camera and does this thing, right? Does the message, does all the things. Let's just say for the sake of this illustration that the church has enough money to do all the good, to pay the people, to do all the stuff, but the people never come to the church. Now, in our many visits, I recall, I think, you saying, look, part of the gig here is coming together to talk about Jesus and hear the good word.
Yeah. Do not forsake the assembling together is, I think, Hebrews chapter 12 or 13.
So if that's on the horizon, unless something drastically changes, Gen Zers are telling us by way of statistics, I'll consume it, but I'll consume it when I want to consume it in my time on my device. I don't want to gather. A little bit, they're already disobeying what's in the Bible to some degree. They're either knowingly disobeying it, or they don't know anything about it, so they're just willy-nilly
or they
disobeying
don't care
it,
yet.
or they don't care yet. But I think it's a bit alarming that may be the future of all of this.
So I don't do doom and gloom very well, right? And so what I'm thinking is in my head right now, okay, how can we capitalize on that? They're willing to listen. Can we start? So during COVID, my neighbors were watching our church across the street. And we were talking. I said, why don't Bonnie and I come over to your house and we'll watch together, which might have been breaking the rules during COVID. I don't know. Part of me, sorry, part of me didn't care. But so we went over there and we worshiped together as a small group. And I'm wondering if maybe the large 1,000 people room gatherings aren't going to happen as much in the future with people, but maybe a handful of friends at Rumors Bar and Grill could get together and watch church.
Yeah, I don't mean to be
like that.
I don't want to say I want to be doom and gloom about it. I think church is.
I think we have to figure out how to make church happen.
Right.
So there was a day when people gathered and soldiers would come in and grab the gatherers and then send them into a coliseum with lions, tigers, and bears. Oh my! Right. The gathering was illegal. And the church flourished during that time because they did things like they met in the quiet of homes, and they did things, but they still gathered, and they gathered in secret, and they gathered in China during the times of when, and it still may be kind of this way, that the secret church had to. Here's my point. We have to adapt to how to reach the next person.
Right.
And if the next person's only listening online, we have to figure out how to do that, and then how to move them into the next step of discipleship or the next step of what it means to follow Jesus. Right? We can't surrender and say, oh, we're screwed.
So back to my thought before we got off on this. pre-pandemic now, so 2018-19, before we all were told to go to our homes and stay apart and do all the things, 3,500 people left the religious congregation every day. 1.2 million walked away every year. Churches are now, 5 years after the pandemic, are at about 85% of what their attendance levels were nationwide. That doesn't speak to Hope Church specifically, of course. It just says as an average and overall.
Yeah.
And it seems that getting that 15% back, which presumably is tens of millions of people overall, has been a tough road to hoe. Do you see a time when you ever get back to full attendance?
Okay, I say this carefully. Again, I go back to, I think many people in America were doing church because of a tradition and because of an obligation and because of a social structure that said you need to be a kind of person that goes to church without the relationship with Jesus. So part of me says maybe in one way, the fact that they're just not hanging out in church for the sake of hanging out in church is a good thing if we can draw them back into real relationship with Jesus. Right. So I'm not panicked about the lack of attendance. I want to figure out a way to make that attendance real in their life so that they want to be there. Right. And so that is true. So the pre-COVID numbers in church and the post-COVID numbers of people in church is devastating. It's financially devastating for a lot of churches.
Oh, sure.
Right. And so all of that. But in some way, there's maybe a reckoning for the church leadership that has to happen too, because I think we were just banking on the fact that people are going to come rather than giving them something substantive and real and life transforming. And so maybe, again, I'm thinking, okay, I don't believe that God is content with people just not paying attention to him. And think he's called us as followers of him to figure it out and to lean into the work of his Holy Spirit to say, how are you going to get that next person to pay attention to me? And it's going to create a need for the church to go out again in the community like we used to back in the day, because the church didn't have buildings. They were infiltrating every place they went. People went out with the love of Jesus, and the Christ follower, who's a real, genuine Christ follower, spoke about Jesus in almost all of their relationships. And we used to, for many, many years, just come to church. Church will take care of it for you.
Do you, when you look around, the Jerry Falwells and all these guys that were
moral majority,
the Pat Robertsons, and there's certainly the Joel Osteens, even, these guys that, whether you believe that they had Jesus at the forefront of their message in their lives, were thought to be some leaders that many millions of people followed.
Yeah.
Do you look around and do you see leaders like that are still in the church? Do you find young people that are inspired by the word of the Lord, that want to lead churches, that want to lead people, that want to make sure they're spreading the good word of Jesus? Or has all of that changed too?
I think a lot of that has changed. I think people are leaning into smaller venues. There may be a resurgence of the crusade kind of events again, where large stadiums and stuff. But most of where I'm seeing that is with musicians.
Sure,
which is beautiful, but also a little bit dangerous, because a lot of those musicians, they'll tell you we're not theologians, we're practitioners of the faith, which is kind of where I feel like I am. Not a musician, but I'm more of a practitioner of my faith than an academic, right?
Although I've heard you've tried to sing.
Yeah, I have tried to sing. Yeah, no, that's why
good.
we have a sound tech in the back that turns my microphone off quite frequently, which I think is unfair.
I think
make a joyful noise to the Lord.
I think that's appropriate.
But I think the hero status of certain communicators or preachers is, like, part of me says, if God uses those people, I'm good. That's amazing. But it's also incredibly dangerous for people, because you end up following the person rather than the person that the person's talking about.
Right.
Right. And so there's a danger to that. So right now, I don't see looming in our country. Craig Rochelle of Life Church in Oklahoma has the largest following of anybody. He's actually of the same denomination I am. They don't advertise our denomination at all. But his church is, but he's a pastor. Like he's a local church pastor. He doesn't travel much. He just broadcasts, right? He'll speak off campus or away from his family like once or twice a year, or literally a handful of times a year. Otherwise, he stays home. He has 6 kids, and he's watched by everybody to see if he's fake or not. And that's one of the things that is happening as well. We have a fair amount of people who had things going on the side that were public figures spiritually, that now you can run but you can't hide. And so those things are being uncovered in a greater. We're doing the same in government. We have the government officials who have been doing things on the side that all of a sudden are being uncovered. And I think the integrity of the superstar in ministry or the superstar in politics is becoming more and more important, and there's a danger to having that kind of power.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say about that brings me a little bit of concern is that social media, in particular, the public forum where everybody has a voice, requires public figures, most public figures, to live a near perfect life.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't allow you to be a flawed human. Are there some things that you should lose your career over? There are.
Mm-hmm.
But if a pastor steps out on his marriage and has a relationship with somebody else, in the court of public opinion, he will never recover from that.
Yeah.
Right? But should he lose his career over it? Should he be able to stand in front of a congregation, no matter the size, and repent and say, I'm flawed, I made a mistake, please forgive me, pray for my forgiveness, and all the things?
In genuine context, yes.
Right, but today, I would argue that in 1955, there's at least a possibility you get that chance as clergy. In 2025, there's absolutely zero chance.
No, it is happening.
Oh,
right?
Really?
Where there's people that have been restored.
No,
right.
I don't doubt that the people have been restored. What I'm saying is, you make one mistake, you lose everything.
Yes.
That's the part that I get a little bit. I would like to believe that if I'm a general manager long enough at this radio station, that there'll be a time in my career when something will happen, unfortunately, with one of my employees, where there will be a situation that I will have to deal with, where I will have to make a decision about whether or not that indiscretion was enough for them to lose their job.
So if someone has a foundation of credibility
mm-hmm.
and they blow a tire, right, you can cover that person. No, you're right. Social media, the bigger they are, the harder they fall.
Well, then church attendance starts to wane because they don't agree with you. You give them a second chance as the lead pastor.
Well, that
but
can happen.
Everybody else says,
that can happen on a slip up in a statement in a sermon.
Sure,
that happens all the time.
Absolutely.
But again, many people, maybe not all, many people will say, you know what, that was a stupid thing he said, but he's got 15 years of track record with our family or with our church. And I think if we lean away from the superstar status and lean into being authentic people
mm-hmm.
and genuine people, I think there's more grace from people than people expect, right? But again, in the media circle, you're probably right.
But
they'll destroy you out there.
The thing that's the part though, is guys like you who have leadership positions in the church, along with what you do on Sunday, most Sundays. Actually, it's more like 22 Sundays a year now. But you know, you might feel one way because the saying is you live with the person every day, right? You get to see them work, you know their heart, you figure, you know their family a little bit, you know the situation, and they step in it, and you're gonna say, you know what, we're good.
Yeah.
Well, why did you make that decision? I'm not talking about it. Well, I mean, I don't have to tell you anything respectfully. We're moving forward with him in a whatever role, and that's what we're doing. Well, I'm done. We're moving on. We're moving forward. That's it. And the chatter keeps going, and the chatter keeps going, and the noise floor keeps up. And then one day, you're sitting in front of your church council going, listen, I've dealt with this. It's a personnel matter. The matter's closed for me. I still feel like we're moving forward. Well, Lipper 17946 says, any of that true? Look, I'm not addressing any of this. So what ends up happening is you being this way ends up causing you a whole heck of a lot of heartburn.
Yes.
And it's never wrong to do the right thing. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the North floor gets so loud and gets so uncomfortable for you that at some level it's just like, look, and that's why you see cancel culture is such a thing. Yeah. We just move the problem along because the machine is too important.
So what? Okay, for the sake of the church,
mm-hmm.
right? I think sometimes people need to resign. Right, when things things go south,
there's always that, right?
That doesn't necessarily mean that the person is unable to be repentant and recover in another setting. Sometimes they can do that in the present setting, and I think you have to read the congregation and you have to listen. The social media part may never recover, but that's maybe one of the things when we're talking about these huge superstars and we're talking about all the power of AI and the broadcasting and stuff. That's maybe one of the reasons that God still, like, his preference, I think, is always a local church.
Oh, I would agree.
Right? Because the local church can surround a guy, surround a gal, and say, we got your back.
Mm-hmm.
We love you. We care for you. We're going to help put you back together, whether that's a staff person, whether a person in the congregation or the lead pastor, whatever it is. You can do more on a local level at the restoration of a person and or the transformation of a person than you can do on a national level.
Sure.
And I think that's where we go to all of this stuff that we've been talking about. Again, in the end, God calls people to be part of a local family called the church, a local church. Right? All of the books of the New Testament were written, let me rephrase that. Most of the books in the New Testament were written to a local church. The church in Rome, the church in Ephesus, the church in Colossae, and going through, right? They were local churches, and then that message spread from there about that. The message to that local church spread to others. And so I think the fault line for the church in general or for people in general is this massive, we are a one nation message, kind of like there's one superstar in the country. I don't think God wants that. I think God will use a person in a broad way, but even Billy Graham back in the day, for those of you who don't know Billy Graham, he was a national evangelist who had massive crusades of thousands and thousands of people. When you surrender your life to Jesus Christ at one of those crusades or at one of those movies, which is what happened in my life at one of the Billy Graham movies, they gave me a little pamphlet, and one of the first things they told you to do is find a local church. Don't follow Billy, find a church. And I think that's what we have to get back to with all of the AI and all the national ability. Like you and I could sit here and we could broadcast in Pakistan.
We could.
Right?
That's true.
And someone there may pick up the message or and this is actually what I pray about as I'm talking, is that someone will hear something here about Jesus and want to follow him. Don't follow me, follow him, right? Find a local place where you can learn about him. And if you can't find a local place, then do whatever you can to hear the message. But create a local place then of gather with followers of Jesus.
Why is now the right time for a Dare to Wonder campaign at Hope Church?
Oh, my goodness. Dare to Wonder is our capital campaign where we're raising funds to expand our facility and to modify our facility.
Modernize it, too.
Modernize it, yeah. So our mall that we purchased was built in the 1960s. Some of those spaces are pretty much the same, right? And so we want to create better spaces. We have specialized in moving to existing spaces and adapting to do whatever we can. We would like to, in this campaign, expand our children's ministry because we have more children than our space is comfortable in, and to do that in a way where we're going to expand the children's ministry that's like first grade through fifth grade, and to make that more conducive to what their needs are, right? In that space, we're going to do an indoor playground or just outside of the space for our community and for the church people. Because we're in a mall, we have people that wander the mall all the time. We think it would be amazing for moms and dads during the day who are at home or for business meetings or whatever to come sit at some tables and have their kids play in our playground. So we're going to have that open. We're going to do that. We're going to expand our youth center. Again, because the volume of kids we want to create, and we've adapted the space, so we're going to kind of redesign it now so it's designed for youth ministry. We're hopefully going to build a coffee shop, so when people are watching their kids play in a playground, they can get a cup of coffee. And we're hoping to have that open all the time. And then for the first time ever in our church, we're going to build offices for the staff where they're designed for a staff office rather than just moving into existing offices or a store where we put up some extra walls and things. And also we're going to beautify the exterior. One of the guys that came to our church one time, he drove up and he told us this later. He goes, I felt like I was walking into a penitentiary. Your church is ugly on the outside. And we admit that. I think we're the ugliest church on the outside anywhere in the city. So we're going to put a little bit more inviting. Again, and this is mission driven, as we want, as people drive by our church, to sense a welcome, right? And right now you sense, oh boy, what is that? When you get in, it's beautiful. But we want to create a more welcoming atmosphere on the outside. So the Dare to Wonder campaign is about that. And it's coming in, the estimates are coming in a little bit more aggressive than we thought, but we've raised an amazing amount of money with donations from people who are secular. We had one family, their retired family, they're moving into a new home and they were going to put their home up for sale. They just instead gave the home to the church, right? Which was blew me away. We had a little kid write a pledge for $10, right? She's awesome. 6. And so that to me is like church, right? The least, and maybe some, I don't even know if I wouldn't say they're wealthy, but people of all flavors and all strata engaged in something that they believe in for the sake of reaching more people with the love of Jesus. Yeah. And we had another couple, it was $10 as well, and they left a card on my desk that says they're retired couple. They're I don't know all their details, but what I know of them, they don't have much. Sure. Right? They left a card with a $10 bill in it and said, this is for the Dare to Wonder campaign. We're praying that God will allow us to give more, but this is all we can handle right now. And I'm like, this is so amazing. Yeah. The sacrifice of people. Again, what we're building, we'd be fine with what we have right now. Right? We would be fine. But the people that are coming, we want to prepare our facility so that it continues to serve Christ. It's that the facility is not the goal. The people are. So we want to continue to build a facility so that the people that are coming someday will benefit and have a great place. That heart started when we had borrowed chairs from the mall, and we borrowed steel chairs, and we said, let's buy some cushioned chairs. And we had room in our facility at that time, our worship center, for 175 chairs. That's all the space we had. And someone on the committee said, well, that's not all the people we're going to have. And we said, well, no, but that's all the space we have. He said, well, we're going to have a new space. Let's buy enough chairs for the next space. And so we bought 300 chairs, and we stored the rest for a year or two in anticipation of the people that were coming so that everybody someday would have a chair. That's why we do 3 services.
$8 million renovation?
Thereabouts.
Thereabout, yeah.
8 to 9 million. We've raised just over 6 so far.
Still on track for an October start?
Yes. Yeah. Late October or mid-October, somewhere around there. And we're still waiting on all the estimates coming in, but we're still on track for an October. And it's pretty exciting.
How long will it take?
A year.
That's
to build it? Yeah, we think about a year. All the work's going to be inside.
Sure.
Almost, except for the exterior piece. Almost all the work. Still be able to work all winter. Unlike a lot of places that you're building here in North Dakota where you have to shut down when it's 30 below, we can just turn up the heat.
Yeah, you just keep throwing the hammers around.
We're hoping we're going to try to gather some of our people from the church to do some of the volunteer work, like demo and stuff. So we're going to try to save money that way. And
you usually don't have problems finding somebody to
demolish things. I'm actually looking forward to that.
Yeah,
my wife isn't. She thinks I'll hurt myself.
Well, she's not wrong. I think there's a lot of people that are.
But yeah, so October is our kickoff date. We'll probably do possibly some kind of breaking ground. Kind of the first time we did is we broke concrete. Sure. We'll probably do some kind of breaking of concrete in late September, and then launch into whenever we can start the demo.
back to the show notes. I went to your website and I found the Dare to Wonder campaign. You do a little 3-minute video, so and people can see some renderings of the space and those sorts of things. So if you're interested, by all means, and if you want to make a contribution or a donation, there's ways to do that too, and you'll see that in the video.
This is amazing to me. We had a lady give a very significant donation to our campaign, and she doesn't attend our church. That's crazy. She just knows what we're doing. She used to attend. She lives in a different state now, and she wrote a pretty significant donation based on her heart for the people that are going to come to faith in Jesus, and it was an investment in the future. And so, I don't think that was the purpose of this podcast, but if people would like to donate, we're open to receiving that.
Yeah. I always think.
Thanks for mentioning that. I would not have mentioned that.
No, I think it, and the reason why I find it interesting is I've known you for a while now. The light turned on for me. There was I don't remember why I was at your office or what the context was of why I was there, but I remember there's a hallway. Maybe it still looks this way. I haven't been there in a while now, but there's a Pastor Paul with glasses on that look like could heat a small European country. So these things are huge, and he had hair. And I remember reading. No, I didn't read the whole thing, of course. So I perused it, the old talk radio trick. I perused it, and I was like. And then we walked out into the sanctuary, and I was like, look at that. Oh, you're a visionary. And it makes perfect sense to me because an integrator, I think if I had some of your staff here that are close to you that you would call maybe your inner circle would say, yeah, his detail's is not great.
Yeah.
But if I need an idea or a solution to a problem, we go to Paul. And so my point in bringing that up was, I thought it reminded me again today when I watched the little 3-minute video. At some point, likely you, certainly you stamped it and said, okay, let's go forward. But likely you said, it's time. Like, visionaries just always have ideas and lots of things. But to say, like, you knew it was time to move out of that space in East Grand Forks. Yeah. You knew it was time to go to the congregation and say, I know this sounds a little crazy, but we'd like to buy them all. Now you've decided, or again, I'm giving you it was your vision to say.
Yeah, I'm going to correct that in a second.
Right, but it was like, okay, we need, this is the next step. There's like a little voice or a calling or something that got either your group together to say, I think we should do this. And then you do it, and it just falls into place.
No, it doesn't just fall.
Well, you know what I mean, though.
But God makes it happen.
That's what I'm saying. The money starts coming, and you're like, you don't know when you stand in front of that camera saying, "Hey, this is an idea we have, so we want to do. Here's the price tag. Please give." Yeah. And they do.
Yeah, because so this particular campaign, I think, was generated as much from the staff as it was from me.
Sure.
Right. The Dare to Wonder, the driving of that, the campaign part of it, the raising the funds of it has been mostly me. Right, with the team, right? But the we should modify some of our spaces. That was collaborative. That was generated from the team.
Sure,
right? But we have a congregation that believes in the mission. Mm-hmm. When we left East Grand Forks, and we had a proper church building,
which I would never recommend. Leaving East Grand is never something you should do.
I think someday we should have a satellite or a campus back there.
I would agree,
but we haven't done that yet. But when we left, it wasn't because we didn't like that space. We left because of the people that are going to come. We see, like, I live with this expectation that God wants His church to grow, that God wants more people to be reached through His name. I think that, so this is a passion for me. I think the church should be living more on offense than defense.
Sure.
Rather than protecting ourselves from the community, I think we should drive into the community and change the community.
Sure.
Like, I pray periodically from our pulpit and or mention it from our pulpit. In 1997, the greater Grand Forks area was flooded, right? And I pray that God would flood our community again, this time with the hope and love of Jesus, right? That people in the greater Grand Forks area, that the love of Christ would be so thick and the passion for Christ would be so thick that if you wanted to go to hell, you'd have to move to Fargo. Sorry.
That was good.
And
was very
I
good.
have people from Fargo in our congregation. Sometimes they write me little notes. Stop with the Fargo stuff, right? I could say someplace else. Move to Texas or something. But it's like I really expect that, like not just our church, but every church should be so committed to spreading the message. Like if it's true, which I believe with all, that people are going to spend eternity apart from God in a place that we would call damnation, if they don't have Jesus as their Savior and Lord. What's stopping us from telling that story? Right. If it's true that he rose again from the dead, like he was crucified, dead, and buried, and then rose again, like if we actually believe that, that's life transforming. That means the struggle of this life, the pain of this life, which, like I wish I could poof people and make all their pain go away. I can't. Sometimes God heals things. Sometimes God changes things. But for everybody, someday eternity is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
And so I believe that God, Matthew chapter 16, I will build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it, right? The prevail doesn't mean that the gates, that we protect ourselves in the gates of hell. It means we're going to take down the gates as the church. We're going to advance forward. And I believe, like I live with the expectation of the next thing God wants to do through us if we just are willing to say yes. So the vision and all that stuff, I think that's all God-given. I think he wants his church to be amazing.
But it still takes. I mean, there's a risk. There's all this.
There was part of this campaign that I thought, okay, I'm 66 years old. One of the big questions through the campaign was, okay, how long are you going to be here?
Sure,
right, because there's going to be a transition at some point, and I committed to I'll be on our team at least through the end of the campaign, which will be a 3-year process. Maybe not full time, maybe part time. I don't know all of that. We're working on that right now. But
he has July off.
Yeah. The dream is that we're going to continue to expand. I think the best days of Hope Church are with the next leader, not just with this leader, because I think that's what God dreams of for his church.
Yeah. You're the right leader at the right time, though.
Yeah.
You came along at a time when, I mean, it needs a energetic person that's going to be able to see things that others can't, and to be able to say. And
God made me with the kind of mind that dreams.
Sure.
In the vision. You mentioned I have a telescope that I used in one of the videos.
Yes.
That was given to me as a gift from the church.
I was surprised you knew it looked like you knew how to use it.
Well, yeah. Well, it's a real telescope, actually. It's brass. It's beautiful.
It looks very nice.
But on the side of it, it says something about a thank you for being a visionary. And I received that thank you, but that's a gift that God's given me. You know, every human being has, when they devote their lives to Christ, has something that they give to the church. For me, it's the leadership gift, right? And so it's a gift from God. It's not like I want to hone it and keep working on it and serve Jesus better, but it's his.
Pastor Paul, thank you.
Thank you. This has been fun.
This has been a good time. We're going to have to do this on a more regular basis.
I'd be open.
Yeah, I mean, it was... this was about the 4th or 5th date I sent your way before we finally got you scheduled on
you
this
send
thing.
them like the morning of or the day before.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's maybe that was maybe an administrative thing.
That's on me. That's how you got headlines last week, was because the guest quiver was a little light. And then I reached out to you thinking, if anybody's going to catch my Hail Mary, it was going to be you.
I would have.
You happen to be detained or had other commitments and so on, and I get it. And so I
will never say no to an opportunity to spread the message of Jesus unless I've already said yes to something else.
Right. And you did. I mean, you said, I can't remember something else. Yeah, something else you had already committed to doing. I shouldn't say you had to do like it was some laborious chore. It was something you'd committed to do.
Probably a wedding.
Probably, or a meeting with a couple, or changing somebody's world a different way. So, but thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
I hope we will do this again. Again, the show notes, they're important for this episode in particular because I did anyway, reference a lot of statistics.
Yeah.
We talked about the capital project at Hope. So some of that information is there. I even clipped an old Herald article where there was.
Is your podcast dropped the same time every week?
Every Tuesday at 9.
Oh,
so every Tuesday at 9, it will.
I knew that
it will drop. Yeah, it is. It drops at anywhere
at 9 o'clock on Tuesday.
Podcasts are found. You can go ahead and find it, which Ryan Cunningham really likes to hear about and gets a collective eye roll from yours truly. So anyway, Pastor Paul, thank you.
Thank you.